She sat quietly at the back of the classroom, her small hands folded on the desk. Her eyes often looking down at the pages in front of her, but sometimes wandering toward the window, where sunlight fell in soft lines across the floor. The teachers moved around, checking on the other students, and she felt like she was almost invisible. It was not that she wanted to be invisible. She just didn't know how to speak up, and speaking up often seemed to bring more trouble than reward. Her classmates talked freely and laughed easily, but she never felt she had words that mattered in the same way. When teachers asked questions, she often hesitated too long, afraid her answer would be wrong. Many of the teachers noticed her quiet nature and began to lower their expectations. They assumed she was not very capable, that she would never achieve much more than average grades and simple tasks done well enough to pass. At home, things were different. The small apartment where she lived was filled with the sounds of her parents talking quietly after work, the clinking of dishes in the kitchen, and the hum of the refrigerator at night. In the corner of the living room sat an old piano. Its wood was scratched in places, and one of the keys stuck slightly when pressed, but to her, it was perfect. This piano had been in the family for years, passed down from someone she had never met, but it had become a secret friend to her. When she sat at it, pressing the keys one by one, she felt as if the piano spoke to her in a language no one else understood. She could lose herself in the sound, letting her fingers move across the keys without thinking too much. Each note became a word, each melody a sentence. And somehow the music told things that she could not say aloud. Her evenings were often long and quiet. After homework was done, she would sit at the piano for hours, trying to play pieces she had heard on the radio or seen in music books. Sometimes she struggled with a particular note, her fingers refusing to move the way she wanted, but she did not give up. She practiced again and again, listening carefully to the sound she produced, adjusting her movements slightly and learning slowly. Her parents sometimes came in and watched her for a moment, smiling at her focus, but mostly leaving her alone. They knew she needed this space, this private time to grow in her own way. She never played for anyone else outside her home. It was a secret she guarded closely. The school had not seen this part of her, and she was not ready to show it to them yet. At school, things were more challenging. The teachers were kind in their own ways, but they were busy with many students and often overlooked those who were quiet. When they spoke to her, it was usually to remind her to speak up more, to participate, to answer questions faster. They did not realize that her mind was full of thoughts, that she was paying attention and learning in her own way, but she had a slower rhythm than the other students. They assumed silence meant lack of interest or lack of skill. Sometimes she tried to explain herself, but words felt clumsy coming out of her mouth. It was easier to smile politely and nod, even if her mind was racing with ideas, with music. With patterns she noticed in numbers or stories, her classmates sometimes teased her gently, sometimes not so gently. She learned to move through the hallways quietly, keeping her head down, avoiding unnecessary attention. Yet she noticed everything around her. She noticed the way sunlight reflected off the classroom walls, the sounds of the janitors sweeping in the mornings, the small details that no one else seemed to see. She noticed the rhythms in the conversations of her friends, the patterns in their laughter. And all of this she stored inside, letting it become part of her thoughts, part of the music she would later create on the piano. She had learned early that she did not need other people's approval to exist in her world. Her piano was enough for her to express the things she could not say. Sometimes she would hear teachers talking about her in ways she could not ignore. Comments like, "She is smart, but slow," or "she tries, but she might never really excel," would float through the air and settle somewhere heavy in her chest. It hurt, yes, but it also made her determined in a quiet way. She did not want to prove them wrong with anger or defiance. She wanted to prove it with something deeper, something they could not ignore. Music became that proof in her mind. Every note she played at home was a small rebellion, a statement that she was capable of more than anyone realized. It was not about showing off. It was about being true to herself and the skills she had nurtured in secret. The piano itself seemed alive under her hands. Sometimes she would close her eyes while playing, letting her memory guide her fingers, feeling the vibrations through the wood. Each time she learned a new piece, she felt a quiet thrill, a sense of accomplishment that made the world outside her room fade away. Even if the day at school had been difficult, even if teachers had underestimated her or classmates had ignored her, she could always return to the piano and feel capable, feel whole. It became a place where mistakes were not judged, where silence was not a weakness, and where her quietness was not a flaw, but a strength. One day, the school announced a talent show. It was meant for students to showcase something special, anything that made them proud. Many students immediately thought about singing, dancing, or acting. She considered it for a moment, but quickly pushed the idea aside. Her teachers probably would not expect her to participate, and she was not sure she was ready to reveal her private world to anyone else. Yet something in her stirred. The thought of sharing music, even just once, filled her with nervous excitement. She imagined sitting at the piano in front of other students and teachers, letting her fingers move, letting the music speak for her. Her stomach tightened at the thought, but the idea lingered in her mind like a small, persistent flame. For the next few days, she returned to the piano with more purpose. She practiced not only for herself, but with a small, secret hope that she might find courage. She repeated sections again and again, trying to perfect each passage. She even imagined the room of the talent show in her mind, picturing how the sound would carry across the space, how the music might make people stop and listen. The thought of someone truly hearing her, of someone realizing the depth of her skill and her heart, became a quiet motivation. Her parents noticed that she was spending extra hours at the piano, but did not ask questions. They trusted her, knowing that this pursuit was important in ways words could not describe. Meanwhile, at school, teachers continued to underestimate her. They barely considered her for the talent show, assuming she would be too shy or uninterested. When her name was mentioned, some teachers shrugged or gave a polite smile, convinced that it would be a small, forgettable performance at best. No one anticipated the intensity of her preparation, the silent hours she had spent perfecting her skill. They had seen her as quiet, average, and slow to respond. They had not seen her dedication, her patience, and her passion. They had not seen the fire that burned quietly inside her. She did not let their doubts stop her. In the quiet of her room, she imagined playing for an audience that had underestimated her. She imagined each note surprising them, capturing their attention, making them pause. And as the day of the talent show approached, her nervousness grew, but so did a sense of anticipation. She realized that she was not performing to prove anyone wrong, but to show herself what she was capable of. Every time she pressed the keys, she felt a connection with the music and with herself stronger than anything else. It was a feeling of control, of expression, of being heard without speaking a single word. Even her friends noticed a change. They had rarely seen her so focused, so intense in her preparation. Some of them were curious, asking why she practiced so much. She would only smile quietly, saying nothing, letting the music remain her secret. The more she practiced, the more confident she felt that she could do something remarkable, even if no one believed it yet. The piano had given her a voice, and she was ready to let it speak. Even if only for a moment, she also thought about the teachers who had underestimated her. It was not about revenge. She did not want them to feel foolish. She simply wanted them to see that quiet determination and hidden talent could exist in anyone. The world often missed the silent ones, those who did not shout to be noticed but worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She was one of those people, and the piano was her companion, her teacher, and her messenger. The night before the talent show, she stayed late at the piano, playing softly as her parents slept. She went through each piece carefully, making sure every note was clear, every transition smooth. Her fingers moved over the keys with familiarity and precision. She felt a mix of excitement and fear, knowing that tomorrow would bring a test she had never faced before, sharing her secret with the world. But she also felt ready, knowing that she had prepared with care and heart. Whatever happened the next day, she had already accomplished something important. She had trusted herself, her skills, and her music. The day of the performance arrived, and she walked into the room quietly, piano waiting nearby. She felt the eyes of her teachers and classmates, but she reminded herself that she had prepared for this. She remembered the quiet hours at home, the mistakes she had corrected, the melodies she had learned. She had nurtured her talent in secret, and now it was time to let it shine. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and let the music begin, unaware that what she was about to create would leave a mark on everyone present. The world may have underestimated her, but she was about to show them what quiet determination could achieve. After the school announced the talent show, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. It was one thing to practice alone in her small room, hidden from everyone's eyes, and another to perform in front of teachers and classmates who had already underestimated her. She returned home each day with her mind filled with music, thinking about melodies, rhythms, and the exact way her fingers should move across the keys. She knew that she had to practice more than ever, even though no one at school believed in her ability. She began to imagine herself on that small stage, feeling the piano under her hands, letting the music carry her confidence and courage. She dedicated every evening to practice, stretching her fingers, playing scales slowly, and then gradually speeding up. Sometimes she struggled with difficult passages, making mistakes that frustrated her, but she did not give up. She repeated the sections over and over, trying to perfect them, learning from every small error. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a mirror that reflected her effort, patience, and growth. Her parents occasionally peeked into the room and smiled quietly, noticing how serious she had become. They never interrupted her, understanding that these hours were precious and private. The piano had become a world of its own, where she could shape her own confidence and skills. Her mind was always thinking ahead. She imagined the room filled with people, their eyes on her, the spotlight shining softly, and the silence waiting to be filled with sound. She pictured the teachers who had doubted her, and she imagined each note making them pause, making them truly hear her for the first time. But she also reminded herself that she was not doing this for revenge or recognition. She was doing it for herself. The music was her language, her way of expressing what words could not. Every chord, every melody carried her story, her patience, and her secret strength. It was a world she had created quietly, one note at a time. Some days fatigue crept in. Her hands ached from long hours of practice, and her mind felt tired from thinking so intensely about every movement. Yet she pushed herself, reminding herself that growth did not happen instantly. Each small improvement mattered. She learned to be patient with herself, to accept that mistakes were part of the process. When she hit a wrong note, she did not despair. Instead, she paused, analyzed what went wrong, and tried again. Over time, she noticed that the mistakes became fewer, the movements smoother, and the music more expressive. Her secret dedication was paying off in ways that no one at school could see. She also discovered that music was not just about technique, but about feeling. It was about connecting with the sound, letting it resonate in her chest, and imagining how it might reach others. She began to play more slowly, listening to the emotional weight of each note. Sometimes, she closed her eyes and let the music guide her fingers, forgetting the notes entirely and focusing only on how the melody felt. These moments were magical. They gave her a sense of freedom and expression that no classroom or teacher had ever provided. She began to understand that her piano practice was teaching her something deeper than music. It was teaching her self-discipline, focus, patience, courage. Meanwhile, at school, her quiet nature continued to make teachers underestimate her. Some would mention her only briefly when discussing the talent show, assuming she would not participate seriously. A few classmates even laughed quietly, convinced that she would not make it through the performance. But she did not pay attention to these opinions. She had learned early that the world often misunderstood quiet people. Her strength came from within, not from the recognition or approval of others. She focused on what she could control, her practice, her preparation, and her commitment to her craft. As the days went by, her confidence began to grow, but it was a quiet, steady confidence. She did not boast or announce her skills to anyone. Instead, she let her fingers speak. She imagined how she would begin the performance, the first notes floating softly, capturing attention gradually. She practiced the entrance over and over, ensuring that her hands would find the correct position instinctively. She thought about the pacing of her music, where to slow down for emphasis, where to let the notes flow quickly, and how to create a sense of anticipation. Every detail mattered, and she considered them all carefully. Sometimes she felt nervous, imagining what it would be like to be seen and heard for the first time. But she transformed that nervous energy into focus. She reminded herself that the audience would not know the hours she had spent alone, but she would. Every day of practice had built her skills, her resilience, and her courage. She began to realize that the performance was not a test of their expectations, but an opportunity to reveal her own potential. The piano had given her the tools, but it was her heart and determination that would make the performance. It's unforgettable. Her parents continued to support her quietly. They noticed the intensity of her dedication, the way her eyes lit up when she mastered a particularly difficult passage. They gave her space, but also encouragement when needed. Sometimes they would ask her to play a piece for them in the evening, and she would do so with a mix of pride and humility. Those small moments were affirmations, gentle reminders that her effort was real and meaningful, even if the school and teachers did not yet recognize it. She also started imagining the reactions of her classmates. She pictured their surprise when they heard her play, the disbelief on their faces when they realized how skilled she had become. These mental rehearsals were both exciting and calming. They allowed her to anticipate the performance, to practice not only the music, but also her composure, her ability to remain steady under observation. She understood that performing was about more than playing the right notes. It was about presence, focus, and connecting with the listeners through sound. As the days turned into nights, she noticed subtle changes in herself. Her posture improved, her fingers moved with more confidence, and her ability to focus for long periods grew. She discovered that music required both patience and emotion, and she began to balance the two. Her secret world of piano practice became a place of growth and self-discovery. She realized that the hours spent alone were not lonely but rich with learning and self-expression. She was becoming more aware of her own capabilities and the quiet power that came from dedication and hard work. Her imagination also played a role in her preparation. She visualized the audience, the stage, and the piano, creating a mental rehearsal space that mirrored reality. She imagined the sound filling the room, the notes resonating in the air, and the subtle shifts in attention as people began to notice the quality of her music. These visualizations helped her prepare for the unexpected, teaching her to stay calm and focused no matter what happened. She understood that confidence came from preparation. Preparation required both practice and imagination. The night before the talent show, she played longer than usual. The room was quiet, the only sounds were the notes echoing softly, and she felt a sense of completeness. Every piece she had prepared was practiced meticulously, and she felt ready, though nerves still fluttered in her chest. She reflected on her journey from quiet corners of the classroom to hours at the piano. From being underestimated to building a hidden strength, she understood that the talent show would not only reveal her music but also the years of silent effort, patience, and determination she had invested. As she finally put down her hands and stepped away from the piano, she felt a mixture of calm and anticipation. Tomorrow, she would step onto a stage and play for people who had not expected much from her. But she did not need their expectations to define her. She had already proven her dedication, her skill, and her passion. The piano had been her companion, her teacher, and her voice. Now, it was time to let the music speak. To let her hidden determination and talent rise from the quiet corners of her life into the open air, ready to astonish everyone who had underestimated. Morning of the talent show arrived with a mix of excitement and nerves that made her stomach tighten. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were comfortable but presentable, knowing that she would be seen and noticed. The piano she had practiced on at home would be replaced by the stage piano at the school, but she trusted her preparation. She arrived early, carrying a small bag with sheet music, though she rarely needed it. The room was already buzzing with students, teachers, and parents, each talking and laughing, sharing excitement for the performances to come. She walked quietly to the side, trying to avoid attention, feeling both small and unusually alert. Her heart beat quickly, yet she focused on her breathing and the sense of control she had cultivated during countless hours at home. Her teachers were talking amongst themselves, glancing occasionally toward her, some with polite smiles, others with little thought at all. They assumed that she would perform quietly, perhaps falter in her presentation, or give a performance that would be forgettable. Some students snickered, whispering about how surprised they would be if she actually did well. She felt the weight of their expectations, or rather, their lack of expectations, but she reminded herself that this was her moment, not theirs. The hours she had spent in quiet practice had built more than skill. They had built resilience, focus, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. This knowledge steadied her, even as the nervous fluttering persisted. As the program began, performers came and went. Students sang, danced, and played instruments. She watched each act with curiosity, noticing the different ways each student engaged with the audience. Some were nervous and fumbled slightly. Others were confident and commanding, mentally observing the energy of the room, how applause followed performance, and how the audience reacted to unexpected mistakes or impressive moments. With each performance, she felt her own anticipation grow. Soon, it would be her turn. She practiced small finger movements under the table, checking her posture. I'm imagining the first note flowing smoothly from her fingers to the piano keys. When her name was called, she felt a sudden tightening in her chest. The room seemed to pause for a moment, the chatter fading as the eyes of teachers, classmates, and parents turned toward her. She walked toward the stage with steady steps, her fingers brushing lightly against the piano keys as she approached. She took a deep breath, remembering the long hours of practice, the patience, the mistakes corrected, and the melodies perfected. The weight of expectation felt heavy. But she reminded herself that she had practiced for herself and for the music itself, not to satisfy others. This thought calmed her. Sitting at the piano, she placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar resistance, the slight unevenness that made each press unique. She glanced at the audience briefly, noting the slight surprise on some faces at her calm composure. Then she closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel the music she had carried in her mind for weeks. She imagined the first chord, the first melody line, and let her fingers find their position instinctively. Her heart continued to beat. Quickly, but a strange sense of peace settled over her as she prepared to play. The first note echoed softly across the room, and a hush fell over the audience. She continued, each note flowing smoothly into the next, her fingers moving with precision and grace. The nervousness in her stomach shifted into a quiet energy that fueled her performance rather than hindering it. Every chord resonated with the hours she had spent alone, the patience she had cultivated, and the music she had carried quietly in her heart. The audience began to notice, sitting straighter, whispering less, eyes widening as they realized the skill and emotion in her playing. She felt a strange connection between herself, the piano, and the room. Each note seemed to fill the space, touching the listeners without her needing to speak. The melodies rose and fell, gentle in some places, powerful in others. She imagined the emotions she wanted to convey: patience, hope, and quiet determination, and let them flow naturally into the music. Her fingers moved almost on their own, guided by the countless hours of practice and the deep feeling that had grown with every evening spent at home. The room became a space of focused attention, the performance commanding respect and admiration. She glanced briefly at her teachers, noticing their eyes wide with surprise. They had underestimated her ability, assuming she would struggle or produce only a simple performance. But the music spoke for itself, transcending their assumptions. Their expressions shifted slowly from doubt to amazement as each passage unfolded with clarity, emotion, and precision. Some leaned forward, captivated, while others were frozen in disbelief. She did not let their reactions distract her, instead letting them fuel her focus. Every note became a testament to her quiet determination and hidden strength. Classmates began to murmur softly among themselves, recognizing the skill and dedication that had been invisible until this moment. The laughter and snickers from earlier faded as they listened more attentively, drawn in by the beauty of the music. She noticed the shift in energy around her, the the change in atmosphere from casual chatter to focused engagement. It was an unfamiliar but thrilling feeling. She realized that music could command attention and respect in a way words often could. Not that her quiet voice had the power to communicate something profound without needing to shout. As the performance continued, she became more immersed in the music, losing track of the audience entirely. She let herself move naturally, letting the rhythm and emotion guide her fingers. The music was no longer just a series of notes. A story, a journey, a reflection of her determination, patience, and hidden skill. Every chord told a piece of her story. Every melody carried the quiet strength she had cultivated over months of solitary practice. The audience could feel it, even if they could not see the countless hours behind it. The room remained silent, save for the piano, as she reached the final sections of her performance. She had practiced this part repeatedly, perfecting the flow, the dynamics, and the emotion. Her fingers moved with confidence, the music swelling and fading with subtlety and power. When she pressed the final chord, the sound lingered in the air, a soft echo that seemed to hold the entire room still for a moment. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was a pause filled with realization, the audience understanding, for the first time, the depth of her skill and dedication. Then the room erupted in applause. It started as a murmur, then grew louder, more enthusiastic. Teachers clapped with admiration, some standing, some nodding in approval. Classmates cheered, some jumping to their feet in excitement. Parents looked on with pride, realizing that the quiet girl they had watched had performed something remarkable. She sat back for a moment, her hands hovering over the keys, letting the applause wash over her. She felt a rush of emotion, relief, joy, pride, and a sense of accomplishment that words could not capture. The performance had exceeded even her own expectations. When she finally stood up, she bowed slightly, acknowledging the audience with quiet grace. The applause continued, filling her with a warm sense of recognition. She walked off the stage feeling light and energized, her earlier nervousness replaced with a quiet triumph. She realized that she had not only performed music, but had shared a part of herself, something hidden and powerful, and that it had been received with respect and admiration. This moment validated all the quiet hours, the mistakes corrected, the patience exercised, and the determination that had driven her every evening at the piano. Teachers approached her afterward, offering praise and congratulations. They admitted their surprise and expressed admiration for her skill, something they had not expected. She smiled politely, accepting their words, but inside, she knew that the real validation had come from within, from the confidence she had gained, and from the music she had created. The performance had changed how others saw her, but more importantly, it had changed how she saw herself. She felt capable, strong, and confident, ready to continue pursuing her passion with renewed energy. Throughout the rest of the day, students came to speak with her, offering compliments and expressing amazement at her ability. She listened quietly, smiling, letting their words wash over her without letting them overwhelm her. She had learned to appreciate recognition, but she also knew that her dedication and skill were her own. Cultivated in the quiet hours when no one was watching, the experience reinforced her belief in the value of hard work, patience, and staying true to oneself. Even when others underestimate or overlook your potential, by the end of the day, she returned home with a light heart, carrying with her the memory of the performance, the reactions, and the applause. She sat at her piano that evening, fingers lightly touching the keys, and played softly, not for an audience, but for herself. Each note reminded her of her journey, the quiet determination, the hidden practice, and the courage to share her talent. She felt a sense of completion, a fulfillment that extended beyond the applause and recognition. The piano had given her a voice, a way to express herself, and a bridge to connect with the world, and she had embraced it fully. After the performance, her life at school began to shift slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Teachers who had once overlooked her began to pay closer attention, watching her in class with newfound curiosity. They asked her questions more patiently, listened to her ideas, and encouraged her to share her thoughts. Some of them admitted quietly to one another that they had underestimated her. Surprised by the depth of her talent and the strength she had demonstrated during the performance, even students who had laughed at her earlier now approached her with respect, asking about her music, how she learned it, and what had inspired her to play with such emotion. The hallways felt different, filled with small changes in the way people treated her, as if the performance had quietly rewritten the rules of how they saw her. At first, these changes made her feel uneasy. She had always moved through the school quietly, unnoticed, and now the attention felt strange and unfamiliar. People were curious, complimenting her skill, and some even wanted her to give advice on music or help with other performances. She listened politely, grateful but careful not to let it go to her head. She understood that this was a new experience, one that required balance. Confidence did not mean arrogance, and she wanted to maintain the humility that had guided her practice for so long. Yet, she also recognized that her world had expanded. She realized that people were capable of changing their minds, that judgments could be reconsidered, and that hidden talents could surface at the right moment. Her parents noticed a change as well. They saw a brightness in her eyes that had not been there before, a quiet confidence that radiated when she spoke or moved. They continued to support her in the evenings, watching from the doorway as she played the piano. Sometimes they offered gentle encouragement or asked her to play a new piece for them. These moments were now more frequent, filled with pride and joy. They saw not only her skill, but also her courage, the determination to face a stage, and the strength it took to share something so personal with others. The piano had been her companion in private, and now it had become a bridge between her and the wider world. She began to receive invitations to participate in other events, performances, and small competitions. Teachers recommended her for music workshops and encouraged her to explore opportunities that had never seemed possible before. Each new invitation brought a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She remembered the nervous energy of her first talent show and understood that the journey would continue to challenge her. But she also knew that she was capable. Every note she played was a step toward mastering not only the instrument, but also her own sense of self and confidence. Despite the attention, she remained grounded. She continued to practice daily, not for recognition, but to improve her skill and deepen her connection with music. She explored new pieces, experimented with melodies, and allowed herself to express emotions she had previously kept hidden. Music had become a way to navigate her feelings, to communicate without words, and to connect with others. The performance had opened doors, but the true reward was the understanding that her dedication and passion could create something meaningful and lasting. Her classmates slowly began to see her differently. Some asked her for help with music, curious about her approach and the techniques she had mastered. Others simply nodded with respect when they passed her in the hall. The whispers and laughter that once followed her were replaced with admiration and interest. She noticed the shift, but did not let it distract her from her own growth. She had learned that attention and recognition were fleeting, but the skills and confidence she cultivated through her dedication were permanent. She valued the quiet progress she made, knowing that it would continue to serve her in ways far beyond the classroom or the stage. Teachers who had doubted her began to change the way they approached other students as well. They realized that quiet students might hold untapped potential, hidden behind shyness or silence. Some of them reflected on their own biases and assumptions, recognizing that they had judged too quickly. She had unknowingly influenced the environment around her, showing that talent could be concealed and that patience, observation, and encouragement were necessary to uncover it. Her performance had become more than a personal achievement. It had subtly changed the culture of the classroom, encouraging a more open and attentive approach to all students. She continued to grow not only in skill, but also in self-awareness. The performance had taught her about courage, about the importance of preparation, and about trusting herself. She began to notice the small ways she could improve, analyzing her practice routines, exploring new techniques, and pushing herself to explore emotional depth in her music. The piano was no longer just a tool for expression. It had become a teacher in itself, guiding her toward patience, persistence, and self-discovery. Each practice session reinforced the lessons she had learned from the talent show, that confidence grows from preparation, and recognition is a byproduct, not the goal. The applause and admiration she had received lingered in her memory, not as vanity, but as a reminder of what was possible. She realized that while the world might underestimate someone based on quietness or appearances, dedication and passion could reveal hidden strength. She began to encourage other students quietly, sharing tips on practice, offering reassurance, and demonstrating that mistakes were part of growth. Her influence grew naturally, not through words but through example, showing that talent and perseverance could inspire others without needing to dominate the spotlight. As time passed, she became more comfortable with the attention she had earned. Invitations to perform became more regular, and she approached each one with focus and calm. The nervous energy that had accompanied her first performance became a familiar companion, guiding her preparation rather than overwhelming her. She learned to channel it into precision and expression, turning anxiety into a source of strength. Her journey demonstrated that growth often comes from facing challenges, embracing discomfort, and trusting in one's abilities. The piano had provided her with a space to develop these qualities in private, and now the world was beginning to recognize them. Her parents continued to support her, helping her balance school responsibilities with her growing musical opportunities. They attended her performances when possible, cheering quietly from the audience and offering encouragement afterward. They had witnessed her evolution from a quiet, underestimated student to a confident, skilled performer. Their pride was palpable, but they also understood that the true reward was not recognition from others, but her own sense of accomplishment and growth. They nurtured her independence, allowing her to make choices about which opportunities to pursue and how to continue developing her talent. The experience also changed how she approached challenges beyond music. She became more willing to participate in class discussions, more confident in expressing her ideas, and more patient with herself when learning new skills. The lessons learned through her dedication to the piano patience, focus, resilience, and self-trust translated into other areas of her life. She realized that underestimation from others did not define her abilities, and that she could achieve more than anyone expected if she remained committed and persistent. The piano had not only given her a voice in music but also strengthened her confidence in all aspects of her life. Teachers began to notice her contributions beyond performance. She approached assignments with care, offered thoughtful input during discussions, and supported her classmates in quiet but meaningful ways. They recognized that her initial quietness had concealed a depth of understanding, creativity, and determination. The performance had been a catalyst, opening the door to recognition. But it was her consistent dedication and integrity that solidified their respect. Her influence grew subtly but steadily. Impacting both peers and educators, she continued to explore the piano, learning more complex pieces and experimenting with her own interpretations. Her practice sessions were both disciplined and creative, combining technical skill with emotional expression. She began to write small pieces of her own, inspired by the experiences and emotions she encountered in daily life. Music had become a lifelong companion, a way to understand herself and connect with others. The talent show was no longer a singular event, but the beginning of a journey that would shape her growth, confidence, and understanding of her own potential. Through it all, she maintained humility, recognizing that her journey was ongoing. She understood that skill could always be improved, that mistakes were part of growth, and that quiet determination often held more power than loud declarations. She remained focused on the music itself, on the joy of expression, and on the satisfaction of personal progress. The recognition she received was meaningful, but it did not overshadow the value of the process, the private hours of practice, and the internal growth that had brought her to this point. Her story began to inspire others quietly. Classmates who had once overlooked her now saw the value of persistence and dedication. Teachers became more attentive to students who were quiet or seemed unremarkable, understanding that potential could be hidden. The performance had not only changed perceptions of her, but had subtly influenced the environment around her, encouraging a culture of observation, patience, and encouragement. She realized that talent, when nurtured with care and determination, could transform both personal confidence and the attitudes of those around her. Looking back, she realized that every small, quiet effort had contributed to her growth. The hours of practice alone, the patience through mistakes, the emotional investment in music hall of these had shaped her into a confident, capable, and expressive performer. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that growth never truly ends, and that the lessons of patience, focus, and dedication would serve her in all aspects of life. The performance that had changed how others saw her was just the beginning. A gateway to a life of creativity, confidence, and quiet but powerful influence.